You walk into the gym thinking you're building something, you push, you sweat, you grind, but deep down there's a quiet question your body is asking, why? Why are you doing this? What's the signal? What's the goal? And if your nervous system doesn't get a clear answer, it doesn't adapt. Most people enter the gym thinking movement equals progress. They pick up weights, follow routines, chase the burn, and count the sweat like it's a sign of success. But the body is not a machine you can program blindly, and the brain is not a passive observer. It is the master controller, the gatekeeper of all adaptation. And if you move without neurological intention, without a signal that says this matters, then your body does not adapt, it endures. It tolerates, it survives, but it does not grow. The nervous system responds to precision, not chaos. And when you train without that precision, you are not activating change, you are repeating noise. Every movement you perform is governed by a neural circuit, an electrical pattern between brain and muscle that must be reinforced with clarity. Without clear input, the nervous system cannot prioritize which pathways to strengthen, which tissues to repair, which systems to upgrade. You may be moving, but your brain is not learning, and without learning, there is no progress. That is the great deception of modern training, thinking effort equals evolution. But sweat is not the metric of growth, neural engagement is. And when your nervous system is disengaged, when your reps are mindless, when your posture is sloppy and your breath is erratic, you are sending the signal that this work is background noise. The brain filters it out, the body stays the same, and you call it a plateau. Intentional training means you are fully inside the movement. Not just going through the motions, but inhabiting them, aligning breath, posture, and awareness with every rep. This kind of training lights up the brain like a switchboard. It tells the nervous system, this is real, this is a threat, we must adapt. That's when you trigger neuroplasticity, motor learning, and muscular coordination. That's when your nervous system decides to invest resources in your transformation. But if you train distracted, if you're checking your phone between sets, if you're lifting to impress rather than engage, you are stealing signal from the system that controls all growth. The body was not built to respond to random activity. It was built to respond to challenge that demands a neurological response. The brain must perceive effort as meaningful. That is the biological gate you must pass through every time you train. This is not about intensity alone, it's about intention. It's about reverence for the system that God designed to govern your strength. The nervous system is not a background process. It is the throne from which every physical outcome is declared. And if you are not training in service to that throne, if your movements are not anchored in awareness, you are worshiping the illusion of progress while your biology remains unchanged. Real training is sacred. It begins in the mind, it commands the breath, it shapes the posture, it sharpens the will. It is not casual. It is not noisy. It is focused, spiritual war. You can sweat, struggle, and push yourself to exhaustion, but if the nervous system doesn't register the effort as meaningful, nothing changes. Because effort alone does not trigger growth. The human body was not designed to respond to random motion or blind intensity. It was designed to adapt to precise signals, biological messages sent through tension, timing, and focus. The brain governs everything. It decides what stays weak and what gets stronger, and it makes those decisions not based on how much pain you feel, but how intelligent the stimulus is. Pain is not progress. Burn is not growth. Adaptation is a response to specific, intentional stress that the nervous system interprets as urgent enough to change. If your training is just about grinding out reps, if you're chasing the pump without respecting the pattern, the brain categorizes that input as noise. It doesn't prioritize repair, it doesn't rewire movement, it doesn't build resilience because you haven't given it a reason to. It's not just about working hard, it's about sending the right signal with clarity and consistency. That's how muscle fibers are recruited efficiently. That's how motor neurons fire in proper sequence. That's how the endocrine system releases the hormones that fuel recovery and growth. The nervous system is the conductor. If you're not following its rhythm, your effort becomes wasted heat, energy burned without transformation. Most people think they need more volume, more sets, more time in the gym, but they don't need more, they need better. They need to train with focus so intense, so present, that the brain has no choice but to respond. That's when the nervous system releases neuromuscular inhibitors, ramps up motor unit recruitment, and begins the process of building a stronger, faster, more coordinated body. But if your form is sloppy, your breath is shallow, and your mind is elsewhere, the signal is weak. And the nervous system is not fooled by motion without meaning. Growth doesn't come from exhaustion. It comes from intentional disruption of homeostasis, just enough stress to say, we need to become stronger, followed by the right rest to recover and rebuild. And the threshold for that signal is governed by the brain, not your ego. If your nervous system is overstimulated from lack of sleep, poor nutrition, or mental distraction, you might not even reach the signal. You might be working hard and getting nowhere, because the system that triggers growth is not your willpower. It is your biology, and your biology responds to specificity, not chaos. This is why effort alone is not enough. Effort must be paired with awareness. It must be governed by science, by structure, by neural intention. You don't grow because you try harder. You grow because your nervous system receives the right message, under the right conditions, repeated often enough to build a new baseline. That's how transformation happens. That's how performance is forged, not through louder effort, but through deeper signal. Rest is not a break from progress. It is the moment when progress is made. Yet most people treat rest like it's a weakness, like it's optional, like it's somehow separate from the work. But if you train without understanding recovery, if you push your body without giving the nervous system time to rebuild, then every workout becomes a withdrawal with no deposit. The result is simple: burnout, stagnation, injury, and frustration, because the nervous system doesn't adapt while you train, it adapts while you recover. That's when your brain consolidates motor patterns, your muscles rebuild, and your hormones recalibrate. If that cycle is broken, your progress is broken. The body has a finite capacity to tolerate stress. Every rep, every lift, every sprint adds load, not just to the muscles, but to the nervous system. The more intense the training, the deeper the neurological fatigue, and if you stack session upon session without strategic recovery, your nervous system begins to dull the signal. Your ability to generate force drops, your coordination fades, your motivation disappears. These are not signs of weakness, they are signals from the brain that the system is overloaded. And most people ignore those signals. They grind through them, mistaking pain for progress, exhaustion for discipline. But the brain doesn't adapt under chronic fatigue. It shuts down adaptation to protect the body from collapse. True growth requires cycles of effort, followed by cycles of restoration. In that restoration, the nervous system integrates what it learned under pressure. It rewires movement, reinforces skill, and increases your baseline for the next challenge. Without that recovery window, all you're doing is breaking the body down over and over, hoping it will somehow rise stronger. But the nervous system is not built on hope. It is built on rhythm, on balance, on honoring the biological truth that adaptation only happens in the space between stress. That space is sacred. It is where strength is reborn. Cortisol, adrenaline, and dopamine, these powerful chemicals surge during training, allowing you to push, focus, and endure. But if they remain elevated because you never rest, they begin to damage the very system they once enhanced. Recovery resets these neurochemicals. It restores hormonal balance. It reactivates parasympathetic tone through breath, sleep, and stillness. And without that reset, you're training in a state of chronic dysregulation. Your lifts may look the same, but under the surface, your system is unraveling. And the nervous system will always prioritize survival over strength. This is why real athletes, real warriors, understand the paradox. Rest is work. Stillness is strategy. Recovery is not the opposite of discipline, it is the highest expression of it. Because it takes courage to step back, it takes wisdom to listen to your system, and it takes reverence to allow the body to rebuild itself stronger than it was before. Breath is not background noise. It is the operating system of strength, the invisible force that governs how much power you can produce, how much stability you can hold, and how long you can endure. If your breath is shallow, disconnected, or unconscious during training, you are short, circuiting your output at the source. You can lift heavy, move fast, push hard, but if the breath is not in sync with your nervous system, your performance is leaking energy. The brain doesn't just control movement, it constantly scans internal states, and breath is the loudest signal. It tells the brain whether you are safe, whether to relax, whether to brace, whether to survive or thrive. Without proper breath control, your core weakens, your posture collapses, and your brain retreats from high output to self-protection. The diaphragm is your internal stabilizer. When you breathe deeply and correctly down into the belly, with nasal inhalation and controlled exhalation, you create abdominal pressure that locks your spine into place. That pressure is the foundation of all safe and powerful movement. Every lift, every sprint, every explosive action depends on that internal brace. If your breath is erratic, that brace disappears. Your nervous system senses instability and limits your force production to prevent injury. You didn't fail the rep because you weren't strong enough. You failed it because your nervous system no longer trusted your structure. Controlled breathing is not just about oxygen, it's about message. A slow, deliberate exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, calming the body, sharpening focus, and restoring control. A powerful inhale before a lift triggers the sympathetic system, generating force, creating tension, preparing for action. Breath is how you switch gears between states. It is the remote control of your nervous system, and if you don't learn how to use it, your training will always be capped. You will never access your full capacity because your brain will be operating on incomplete data, uncertain, unstable, and unwilling to let you go further. Think of the strongest, most composed athletes. They don't just move well, they breathe with intention. Their breath drives their rhythm, their breath commands their body. That's not coincidence, that's neurobiology. Breath control regulates the vagus nerve, which connects brain to gut, diaphragm to cortex, calm to chaos. When the breath is mastered, movement becomes cleaner, power becomes smoother, and fatigue becomes something you outlast instead of surrender to. You don't just breathe to stay alive, you breathe to stay aligned. In every rep, the breath must lead. Not trail behind, not get lost, not become an afterthought. It is the first signal, the inner cue, the spark that tells the nervous system we are ready. We are stable, we are locked in, and when that signal is strong, your strength becomes something more than physical. It becomes intentional, intelligent, and unstoppable. Your hormones are not just chemical messengers, they are the architects of your progress. Every rep you perform, every set you complete, triggers a cascade of hormonal responses that either build you up or break you down. And if you don't understand how to work with these forces, you are working against your own biology. Because the hormones that govern performance, dopamine, cortisol, testosterone, growth hormone, do not respond to effort alone. They respond to precision, rhythm, intensity, recovery, and focus. They are regulated by the brain, influenced by breath, sleep, light, and even thought. If you're training without honoring these internal systems, you're not training, you're draining. Dopamine is the molecule of drive. It is not motivation, it is direction. It rises in anticipation of challenge, not just after reward. When you train with clear goals, structured progression, and deliberate intensity, dopamine rises and reinforces the behavior. It strengthens the neural circuits that link effort to outcome. But if your workouts are chaotic, if you're constantly distracted, switching plans, chasing fatigue instead of progress, you confuse the system. Dopamine drops, drive fades, consistency dies. That is not weakness, that is neurochemistry. Cortisol is not your enemy, it is your alarm system. It spikes in response to stress to mobilize energy and focus. During intense training, cortisol rises to help you push. But if you live in a constant state of stress, Poor sleep, poor breath, poor recovery, cortisol never resets. It stays elevated, and chronically elevated cortisol begins to sabotage testosterone, destroy sleep quality, impair recovery, and weaken the immune system. Your system enters survival mode, and in survival mode the body doesn't care about strength. It only cares about preservation. That's when gains vanish, energy plummets, and your mind starts resisting the very work you used to love. Testosterone and growth hormone, the builders, are released most powerfully when training is intense but not excessive, when rest is deep, and when the body senses safety and readiness. Short, high-quality sessions with full body engagement and proper breath work stimulate these anabolic hormones. Long, unfocused, excessive volume without recovery blunts them. Your training must send a clear signal: challenge, then repair. Demand, then support. Otherwise, the brain withholds these resources. You are not owed progress. You must earn it by aligning with the biological code. Even your mindset, your anticipation of reward, your belief in your effort, all of it shapes hormonal response. The body listens to the brain, and the brain listens to patterns. That's why training is not just physical repetition. It is neurochemical orchestration. You are conducting a hormonal symphony every time you step into the gym. If the rhythm is off, the music collapses. But when the timing, the breath, the intensity, and the recovery are in harmony, your hormones rise like a divine tide, lifting everything: strength, discipline, clarity, resilience. This is not just science. This is sacred design.